This is the League of Extraordinary Divers, episode 53.
Welcome to the League of Extraordinary Divers podcast, where you'll hear salty stories from the diving legends themselves. And now your host, Ted Clark.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the League of Extraordinary Divers. It is so awesome to have you here with me today. Today's guest is one of the most standout, iconic figures in our industry. Paul Toomer looks more like a rock star than an accomplished technical diving instructor trainer. His wit and his fun-loving nature are balanced by his dedication to his craft. Paul is the president of training agency RAID. He is a working instructor trainer and expedition diver. After living in South Africa for 23 years, it's odd that Paul discovered diving in the cold waters of southern England. It is this kind of behavior that defines Paul and his passion for doing things differently. Within months of learning to dive, he had his own center in London and rapidly progressed to course director before finding his passion for technical diving in 2002. Paul is an avid wreck, cave, side mount, and rebreather diver. In 2002, Paul began pursuing his technical diving interests, and rebreather diving became his main focus. In 2007, he decided to concentrate purely on technical diver training and expeditions, and Diving Matrix Tech Lab was born. Tech Lab was innovative in its design and philosophy and set the benchmark for advanced diver training. In 2011, Paul was offered the position as Director of Technical Training for SSI, Scuba Schools International, and was responsible for writing diver and instructor manuals and training standards, as well as training future technical instructors and trainers. In 2014, Paul became co-owner of RAID International. Initially, he held the position of training director, but in 2019, he accepted the position as president for the company. Paul has dived wrecks and caves all over the world and also safely planned and executed many deep ocean wreck dives. He's participated in multiple expeditions, including the HMS Hampshire, Vanguard, and Royal Oak in Scapa Flow. In Malta and Italy, he's worked on ancient Italian and Phoenician amphora wrecks and has participated in exploratory dives on the Polish destroyer L-72, the British submarine HMS Olympus, and American World War II B-24 bomber, and many, many others. Paul regularly contributes to various dive magazines, including Submerged, Diver, Sport Diver, and Tanked Up. He's worked with film and TV companies as a diver, supplier, and advisor. He's given many diving-related presentations at training agency member events, OzTech, DEMA, Tech Dive USA, Baltic Tech, ADEX, Eurotech, Tech Camp, the British Scuba Industry Trade Association, the London International Dive Show, and global dealer seminars. A little boy called Sebastian, motorcycles, tattoos, and playing drums are the other major influences in Paul's life. But before we get to our interview, I want to thank our sponsor. Aggressor Adventures is the adventurer's choice for world-class, intimate, and artful adventures on ocean, river, or land. Let Aggressor Adventures immerse you in new experiences, change the way you see the world, and create your adventure of a lifetime. And now my interview with technical diving legend and literal rock star, Paul Toomer. Hey, Toomer, it's great to have you on the League of Extraordinary Divers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. How are you doing?
Oh man, awesome. Awesome as always. And this is a treat to have you on. We've been trying to get together for a very, very long time. And being across the pond makes the time things different, and no DEMA show and everything like that. So it is great to finally connect with you. But I reflect back to just ages ago when this show was launching and first coming out there, and I'm grabbing names of legends in the industry, and people start telling me, especially our same UK friends, they start telling me you gotta get Tumor on, you gotta get Tumor on. I'm like, tumor. I don't know a tumor. What's tumor? And all of a sudden, man, everyone's just like, no, you got to meet it. And I think we met in a DEMA hotel bar, and we like hit it off there, and then it just went from there. And the last time I was at the Go Diving show in Coventry with you, oh my gosh, we had a blast. I got to know you so well, and then also see the professional side of you, not just the fun party guy that we had shared experiences with, but the professional side as you work that show, and just seeing how connected you are in the industry, in the technical space, and then of course with RAID. So I am just so delighted that we're finally getting together, bud.
Yeah, I've got to say I am super, super chuffed. The DEMA show, we had so much planned, didn't we, to do at DEMA, and then we were like, okay, we'll do it at the next DEMA, and of course there's no DEMA, and we're all locked down, and no one can fly anywhere. This is so good to be on and just connect and talk about us and diving and fun and partying and
exactly all of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's start it off with, like, you've got this legendary career and you've touched and trained so many people. How did this all start? Take us back. What was your inspiration to be in the industry and to be a diving professional and do what you do today?
Okay, cool. Right, this will be a pretty long answer, I guess.
Yeah.
When I was young, my dad was quite avid listening to and watching Jacques Cousteau and reading about all his escapades, like any child of my era. And I remember begging, and he bought me a Seaco dive watch, which I completely cherished. And then when it came time for me to do my first try dive, the film Jaws came out about a year before. And I made the big mistake of watching it, right? And I was living in South Africa at the time, and we got down to the ocean, and we were with my dad's buddy Pat, and he's ex-military, so he's like massive arms, big, huge guy, like a manly man, proper scuba diver in those days, right?
Right.
And of course, we get there, and he opens the window, and one of his dive buddies is just stripping off his wetsuit and walking up to the car, and he goes, "Oh, what have you seen?" And he goes, "Yeah, we saw a couple of hammerheads, we saw a tiger, we saw this, we saw that." And my eyes are getting bigger and bigger. And I was too frightened to even get in the water. Anyway, roll on the years, 1992, I made my first visit to the USA. And my dad took me and the family on a trip around Florida. And we ended up in Key West, and we went snorkeling. And they have the tarpon fish down there, and tarpon are big, right?
Yeah.
Well, they swam underneath me, and I walked on the water. I was so frightened. Okay. I climbed out that water, and I sat on a pontoon, and my dad was laughing at me and everything. I was absolutely petrified. So we go on a few years. 1996, I am just turned 30. And my buddy phones me up, and he's at an outdoor show in England, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to learn to scuba dive?" So I'm like, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Listen, the government's funding anyone who says that they will become a professional scuba diver. They're funding your first course at 99 quid." So I'm like, £99, okay, I'm in, right? So we come down, and we meet our instructors. And the guy who owned the dive center is still a dear friend of mine. I ride motorcycles and dive with him to this day. His name's Steve Axtell, and he was PADI course director at the time. And then in walks this other instructor, this skinny little guy wearing glasses, very, very short cropped hair, who turns out to be Phil Short, right?
Another League of Extraordinary diver. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where my career begins, because I am now sitting in a room with two very, very distinguished, very well-respected guys who had barely stuck a pin in a map at that time. Phil was still training to be a tech diver. And they embraced me. They loved my craziness. They loved the motorcycles, the rock and roll, the tattoos. They digged all that. I was really easy to get on with. I was lots of fun. So both of them just put me underneath their wing, and off I went. And I did up to dive master with them both. And then Phil went off and joined Kevin Gurr, who was another massive influence in my life. And they went off and did the Phoenix project. And then I stayed and became an instructor. And then I was a dive master in training, and I started to inquire about what a scuba diving instructor earns. And my job at the time was a motorcycle courier in London. So I delivered parcels via motorcycle in London. Wow. It's a dangerous job.
I was going to say.
You're on the timeline. You're on two wheels, rain, snow, sleet, hail, sunshine. Wow. But the faster you get that parcel there, the more money you make, right? So I was making potloads of money. I was doing real well. And they said, oh, well, you probably earn about £50 a day or £70 a day. I'm like, sheesh, I can earn that in 3 hours, man. So I kind of sat there. I sat with my dad. I sat with my sister. I said, you know what? I've saved up a bit of money. Why don't we just open a dive center? And we'll open the dive center in London. And everyone laughed at me except for Phil and Steve. They were the only two who really didn't laugh at me. And then I found the premises. We all agreed it was going to be a solid business, and off I went. And then I started to find out, I started to meet people in the industry. And I went to a dive show, a trade dive show, to set up some accounts. And two notable things happened. I spoke to a friend of mine, a lifelong friend now, a guy called Simon Chance, who was the sales manager at PADI at the time.
Okay.
And I'd phone him every day, and I'm a bit worried about this, and I'm still a dive master in training, by the way, right? And I'm phoning him, and he's like, and he said, you know what? There's a dive show this weekend. You need to come and meet me. So I said, well, I'll come down to the booth. So he said, well, what do you look like? How will I recognize you? I said, when I walk in that booth, you will recognize me, right? And I never forget his face. And he tells this story so fantastically. He was with a customer, and he turned, and he sees this tall, skinny guy in leather with a dreadlock mohawk and a big, long goatee beard with metal woven into the beard. And my wife at the time, Denise, she was about 6 foot tall, blonde, all wrapped up in leather. And he just kind of like leaned over the customer and pointed at me in mouth, Tuma? And I went, yep. And we began this friendship, which then got me into really some meet some really inspirational people. So I worked with a lot of the people at PADI. Carl Shreves, I did some stuff on the tech stuff with him, and Mark Caney. I became really, really good friends with Mark, and I still am really good friends with Mark. And then Drew kind of embraced me as well.
Okay.
And they always gave me tips, and they always tried to look at the things I was doing well in business and how PADI could help me do other things. PADI was a really, really tight family at that point. Really, really tight people. And even Brian came over, and Doug Nash, who was the guy who brought PADI to the UK, he would take me on walks at DEMA and introduce me to everybody. And then I started to fall in with the manufacturers, and my life just really started to rock and roll. I opened the store on the weekend that I did my exams. So my wife and my sister opened the store while I did my instructor exams.
No way.
And the following weekend, me and my 2 dive masters took 12 new open water divers into the swimming pool. That was baptism of fire. I was like, because basically I like to grab the bull by the horns. I do my planning. I really think about my business ventures and my, the stuff that I do as an instructor, but I just want to get in. And once I've made the decision, I want to get going.
Right.
Anyway, the store took off. And then in 2002, I got a phone call from Paddy saying, no more BS. You put your course director application in or there's going to be hell to pay. So Suzanne Playdell, I think her name's Suzanne Smith now, and Mark Caney basically phoned me up and said, we're not having any more of this. You're going to become a course director. So I did my application. I sat there for 3 hours diligently filling my application in. I presented it, and then I went to the DEMA show, and Suzanne came in and she's like, okay, we need a private talk about your course director. So I'm like, oh, this sounds ominous. Mm-hmm. So we sat down and she said, how long did it take you to put your application together? So I said, I put some time into it. I said, about 3 hours. And she's like, 3 hours? She's like, people put 3 months into this thing, right? 3 hours. And she said, I just want to refer to some of your answers, like how many courses have your team taught, right? I'm too busy to answer this question. I've done a lot. And many of them were just like, refer to the team teaching question answer, right? I just go, refer to team teaching, because I was so busy. I just didn't have the time to sit there and try and calculate how many team teaching efforts I'd done in my life, right? So I said, so what you're telling me is that my application is not really up to par. She said, Paul, your application is the shittest application we've ever received in the history of Paddy, right? She said, but me and Mark Caney will go and see the guys who invite you to become a course director, and we'll put a good word in. And of course, I got a good word. I went and did my course director, which I've got to say was 2 weeks of some of the best. It was the best 2 weeks of my diving education life. I wouldn't say it made me a better diver, but it made me a better manager. It made me a complete instructor trainer. And I had the fortune of working with all of the echelon at Paddy, and
like James Morgan, Johnny Wetstein, right?
All those are the ones that do it. Yeah, and then and Drew flew in, and my team was like kind of the wild team. We were the Flaming Tigers, and we were out partying every night. And some of us met girls there, which a couple of us actually married. It was absolutely balls to the wall. And we worked with a couple of trainers during the week, and at the end of the week, Drew was given no option but to come and examine my team. And I had the luxury of spending 2 days literally with Drew guiding us forward as we became course directors. And then I took over the microphone. I stopped Paddy from talking. After they'd given everyone their badge, I said, right, we've listened to you lot for 12 days. It's time you listen to us now. And we handed out awards, and it was just epic. And then things started to change in London, and many more dive centers were allowed to open around me. And they weren't as, I wouldn't like to say they weren't as professional, but they had a different business model. And that really jeopardized my business model. And what I was also finding was that the retail was doing really well if I was doing retail, but then the training would suffer a little bit, and then the training would pick up, and then the retail would suffer. And I'd found this new love. And funny enough, Phil told me all about technical diving because that's where his passion moved to. But we had a diver who regularly visited our store, a guy called Gavin Hayward, who was diving the Britannic and stuff. Bear in mind, I hadn't even put a twin set on. I was very focused. I said, I'm going to become the top in recreational before I even look at anything else.
Okay.
That was where I was making my money. That's where my business model was going. So that's what I did. And it's funny, I haven't seen Gavin in about 15 years, and he's coming to my house tomorrow. So it's really, it's all going full circle right now, because now he wants to see the gear that I'm diving in, because he quit diving quite a while ago to have a family and what have you. So I got into tech, and then I sold my business in London, and then I moved to Malta. And during that time, I cemented my friendship with many manufacturers, many training agencies, because I managed to get myself into a situation, because I will not badmouth other people. Obviously, we all badmouth people, but I'm clever enough to do it in private and not on a public forum. And I don't agree with everybody's business model. My business model is very different at Ray to what Paddy's is. But that does not stop me from being friends with Drew and Johnny and James and Mark and all of the other wonderful people at that organization. So,
and just for the people listening too, every time we're referring to Drew, that's Drew Richardson, who is the president, CEO of Paddy. Yeah. So that's who when we're saying Drew. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what I worked out very, very rapidly in this industry is that the second you start bad mouthing someone, right, the industry doesn't forget for a start. Everyone thinks it does, but it doesn't. It's too small an industry to start bad-mouthing someone, because I guarantee you, if I bad-mouth you, within 6 months, I will need your help. It's too small an industry, right?
Yeah.
So all of this bad-mouthing and stuff, really, I've managed to stay away from it. So I can be sponsored by DiveSoft for rebreathers, but the guys at JJ don't get upset about it. And I'm sponsored by Fourth Element for undergarments, but I'm sponsored by Hewish for dry suits. But James and Strikey down at Fourth Element don't get angry with me for that. They still ask me to do development. The guys at Sunto know that I'm wearing a Shearwater, but they're happy to help me out with a machine as a backup. I've managed to find this way in the industry where I have such a profound respect for all of the stakeholders and the players in this industry that it's just made my life this most unbelievable thing.
That's great.
And I often give presentations, and I'm like, I am just a diver, and just the diver has managed to become the president of his own training agency. So that means it's not impossible for anybody to do. If I can do it, anyone can do it. I am not super smart. I am not a super diver. It's just what I chose to do was I chose to go and visit the influential people and surround myself by kind of like the eagles of the dive industry.
Yeah.
And hopefully they may show me something. Well, they didn't just show me something. Everybody took me under their wing. Tom Mount, Joe Dettori, Brian Carney, Sean Harrison. This list can go on forever.
Right.
That I've been very, very lucky. And then, so going back to Malta, as I said, it would be a very long story. I'm a bit like a Billy Connolly, right? Billy Connolly starts a joke and then 4 hours later finishes it after he's told 15 other jokes, right? I will get to the point eventually. So I'm in Malta, and I got a phone call asking me if I would like to interview to be the training director for SSI UK.
Okay.
Very prestigious position. And I was like, oh, yes, absolutely. So I think there was quite a few of us up for it. As in any country, there's lots of very fine technical divers out there. And I managed to kind of win through. And I got a phone call out of the blue, and it was like, what are you doing next Monday and Tuesday, or whatever it was? And I'm like, no, I'm free. Okay, we've booked you a hotel. Can you book yourself a flight? You need to go to this place, Wendelstein, I think it was. You're going to meet all the SSI guys. You're going to meet the SSI trainer. And then basically you're going to do your SSI crossover. So I arrived down there, and I meet Mike. Crikey, I've gone blank on Mike's surname. It'll come to me in a minute. And Mike is also now become a really dear friend of mine. And he was the SSI training director global.
Okay.
And we did lectures on the first day, and I was asking lots of questions that many other people in the room perhaps were not. And he was kind of, okay, wow. And then him and all the SSI guys went away. And when someone is always asking questions and inputting, quite frequently their weakness will be elsewhere. so they were all like, oh, this guy is really smart in the classroom, but I'll bet you he's going to be crap in the water, right?
Exactly.
So I arrive at the water, and I've not checked my gear because it's all been frantic. And one of my guys at my store has lent my harness to some guy who's markedly bigger than I am. So we're frantically adjusting my harness as we're in the water. And Mike says, we got to get down there and do the skills. Anyway, I went down and I did the skill circuit, and it was possibly the best skill circuit I've ever put together in my entire life. And what happened then was it turned, which I didn't realize behind the scenes, it went from me just doing a crossover to be the UK training director to actually a global position, because Mike was resigning from the position and he was going into another walk of life. Yeah. So Mike gave me a glowing report to SSI, and if I have one dream at RAID, it's to try and bring Mike into RAID, because he's such a great guy to have on your team. I then got a phone call from the bosses of SSI, and they offered me the position. 2 years later, they sold out to Mares, and I was a bit kind of, no, I don't know if I want to go along with this or not. But the main thing that stopped me from going was my boss was Robert Stoss. And the one thing I must make clear, there's been lots of rumors about my departure from SSI that, I don't like SSI, and I had a fallout with him, and I thought they were rubbish, and I've had all sorts of rumors about it. I can tell you now, Guido Weitzig, Doug McNeese, and Robert Stoss are still three of the finest people that I've ever met. They were two of the best years of my entire life working at that company. It was amazing. The people that I met and the places that I went, it was just fantastic. Yeah. But my ultimate decision was twofold. One, some of the distributors from SSI were going to move on. And one of them was a guy called Jim Holliday, who I'd become quite good friends with. And he knew that I'd always wanted to have an agency going on. So he phoned me up and he said, look, they've sold out to Mares, and I'm probably not going to be the distributor anymore, because the head business model was not to have that many distributors, but to go for more of a paddy business model where they handle all the business themselves. Okay. So he said, how do you fancy starting your own agency? And then, of course, I spoke to Doug and I spoke to Guido, and then finally I spoke to Robert, and Robert said he was only going to stay there for a few years. Now, I'd had a few moments during my career at SSI where Robert, because I was almost his guy, I know I worked with the other two guys very, very extensively, but Robert would have me go in there and fly to Germany and map out the courses with him, and he'd just be very, very black and white. Yes, no. There was no maybes. It was just, yes, we'll do that. No, we won't do this. And when I heard that he was not going to be there for a significant time, that was the final thing for me. Okay. I was like, I liked working with the three guys. So I didn't necessarily want to go and work in a corporate environment, which is really ironic, because 4 years after we start RAID, of course, we got bought by private equity, and and off we went. But it was a dream come true when we got a phone call off Jason Alexander saying, we want to buy your company, and they're a Dallas-based training company, and we're still with them to this day. And hats off to Cal Kamei and the private equity firm, which has changed. They've kept us safe during COVID, because none of us are blind to what the pandemic has done to our industry, right? We're a niche of the travel industry. And I can imagine what some of my friends who are presidents and CEOs of big companies and big training agencies, if I know what my numbers are and we've gone off a cliff face as an agency, and I know that's not through lack of service or lack of quality or lack of customer care or attention to the needs of our divers and our instructors and trainers, then I can only imagine what's happening at the other training agencies and manufacturers. And it's just so sad to see this happening. And as the president of my company, I wake up every day, and my job is to make sure that my dive centers and my instructors stay safe. And I can only imagine what it's like for an industry that has 150, 250,000 members, and waking up every day going, are these guys working? Because they've put their eggs into our basket. Are we able to keep them working? So, so in a nutshell, that is my diving history. I could go on about my diving history for hours, because every time I get to a juncture, there's another 10 people that come into my life who are highly influential.
Right.
The one big thing I love about my career, the overriding thing, is no one, apart from one manufacturer who's since apologized prolifically, no one has ever criticized me for my partying, my motorcycling, my tattoos, my image as a diver. Because it could easily be frowned upon that Paul's the last guy in the bar and the sun has come up, right? The last Dima show, it was so funny, right? I arrive at the guest hotel, which is the one connected to the Dima show.
Yeah.
And I walk in, and I'm walking to go and check in, and I suddenly hear this pow, and I'm like, look around and pow, so I look, and then I see him, and he's waving at me. It's the barman from 2 years ago, remembers my name, right?
No way.
Dude, the bar where you and I sat at 2 years previously, right? He remembered my name. I was like, whoa, you better get your drinking under control, man. What's the odds of a barman remembering your name 2 years later? It was just absolutely crazy. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's my diving history. Partying and diving. That's my two great skills.
Well, yeah, your superpowers.
My superpower, yeah, absolutely.
Well, you've been around the block underwater. There's got to be some just hair-raising stories that you have that have happened to you over the years, because you've been diving in, you said Key West, right? To go snorkeling. These are the conditions that I live in, South Florida here, right? It's easy. But you're in the UK, you're going to the Red Sea, you're going all over. South Africa, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you've been all over. What are some of the more hair-raising encounters you've had diving?
I've had some interesting ones. I did the sardine run in South Africa.
Yeah.
And basically there, what you do is you free dive it. So I decided in my infinite wisdom, we're not just going to South Africa. We're going to take my two buddies in wheelchairs with me as well, right? We're going to do the sardine run with two guys in wheelchairs, right?
Wow.
So
first, you got to set the stage for everybody listening. What is the sardine run?
Okay,
so everybody
so the sardine run is on the Natal coast. So that's the east coast of South Africa. Basically, what happens is a migration of literally billions of sardines, and they follow the current up the coast. So they come from far south, and then they move up and in some cases go right past Durban and beyond. But they form into these massive bait balls. And effectively, the whales, the dolphins, every species of shark, and the gannets or cormorants or whatever, I can't remember what they're called, they are flying off the coast. So basically what you do is you go down to quite a remote area in a valley, and you take a rib out every day, and you just follow the birds, and then you jump off the side of the boat and free dive into the middle of this bait ball and just wait to see what happens. So you'll have...
I haven't done this, but I've seen video of it where you're literally in this ball of billions of fish that are flying around you. And then there'll be a bird that dive bombs, and then a shark will dart out of the side, and then a dolphin pod will come in and fly through. And then you might have a whale coming up from the depths with its mouth open.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's all quite mental, because you kind of swim into it, and I wouldn't like to say we were blasé about it, right? But we're all scuba divers, right? So how hard can this free dive snorkeling thing be, right? Yeah, until you're in the bait ball, right? And you can't go up anymore because there's that many birds hitting the water, right? So you kind of have to swoop out of you have to do like a zigzag out of the bait ball. And then you've got sharks just coming left, right, and center. I mean, like hundreds of sharks just nailing this bait ball, biting right in front of your face. I mean, you should see some of my film footage, a little GoPro I had on my hand. It's just absolutely amazing. And then you've got dolphins just flying through everywhere. We didn't get to see any whales, but you could see the bubble trail coming up from the whales.
Really? Yes.
And we did see the whales on the surface, and you'd kind of dive off the side of the boat and try and follow the whale. It was impossible. But on this one, we dive with a little aluminium rod on a wooden handle. And that would be called the, you can bleep this out in a minute, but that's the fuck off stick, right? Okay. So basically, if a shark gets too close for company, you just jab the thing, right? So we're floating on the surface, and my friend Lee and Stewie are floating over on my left-hand side.
And these are the ones that were wheelchair bound.
No, the two wheelchair guys are on the other side, right?
On the other side, okay.
Yeah, they're on the other side of me, right? And they're just floating in the water, and I'm like, okay, so, and getting them out of the water was quite a chore, right? Because you'd have to jump on the boat, and then we'd have to lever them out of the water. It was, it was quite a lot of manhandling for the poor guys, but these are two real, like, they don't give a monkeys about anything. Let's just get on with it, right? So I can see that, and you can almost talk through the snorkel like you can through a rebreather lift. And I'm going shark, 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 and I can see the shark coming up, and its nictitating membranes go back, and its jaw thrusts forward. The cartilaginous jaw like pops out, and the rows of teeth come out of his mouth, and it's going at Lee, right? Because Lee at that time was carrying the most weight. Okay. It's going after the slow, chubby guy, right? And I'm like, shark, shark. And then I can see Stewie look at me, and then he grabs hold of Lee, and I swam down. I gave the thing a jab, right? And I come back to the surface, and I'm like, look around, and I'm like, wow, that was close. Anyway, as I'm looking down, I'm like, what in heaven's name is that coming at me? And here he comes for a second go, right?
No.
Yeah. And me and Craig was the organizer of the trip. We both flew down and gave him a jab, and he buckled off, but he was coming up fierce and fast, right? Fierce and fast. One of us was definitely going to have a little nibble, right? Anyway, I turn around, right, and Lee and Stewie are pegging it for the boat. So two guys in wheelchairs have managed to get themselves on the boat this time, right? It was so funny. I'm like,
adrenaline.
Oh, really? Now you can get on the boat, right? It was so. Yeah, that was pretty hairy. We got chased out of the water 3 or 4 times by the sharks down there.
Wow.
But you can go, sardine run after sardine run and not have anything. But it was one of the most amazing things I've ever done. We followed a super pod. So we took the little rib into a pod of dolphins, and we were following the birds, and the birds kept moving as the bait ball was being depleted, right? Okay. And we must have motored for an hour and a half, and we did not get through that one pod of dolphins. I would say 20 or 30,000 dolphins. It was unbelievable. So to all of your listeners and to you, mate, if there's one thing you got to do, it's get to South Africa and do the sardine run, because it is utterly, utterly, utterly amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that
because
sounds amazing.
The biodiversity in South Africa is absolutely amazing. As for my other hair-raising moments, testimony to all my instructors who have beasted the living daylights out of me over the years, and made me take the long path rather than the short, quick path. I've never been allowed to progress quickly. Steve never allowed it. Phil never allowed it. Aaron never allowed it. All my instructors never allowed it. It was always slowly. I apprenticed a lot of them as well.
Right.
For my Cave 1 instructor, I apprenticed for I don't know how many months. I kept flying back to apprentice. So my problems were training. My most hair raising have been during training. Not me, because I've had rebreather failures. I've had flooded rebreathers. I've had electronics fail. Wow. I was with my buddy Jamie on our expedition in Malta. I was at 110 meters when the mouthpiece pulled off my JJ. Yeah, and that was that thing flooded.
110 meters.
Yeah, and so that was pretty hairy when I turned around to him, and I'm like gathering up this mouthpiece and like, is it flooded? Yes, it's flooded, yes, right? It's flooded. So I tried to clear a bit out the loop and wasn't having much luck. So I did an open circuit bailout from 110 to the surface. And to be honest, it was just a doddle. It was actually, divers, was my teammates and the safety divers were coming up to me and asking me if I needed more gas and stuff. And it was really no major big deal. But my biggest one, I was teaching a 100-meter trimix open circuit course. This is the last time I've ever worn open circuit to that depth, because training agencies allow you, once you've finished your skill circuits and your students are familiar with the skills and have shown you mastery, then for those big dives, you're allowed to jump into your rebreather. But I was wearing my twin set. What we didn't realize was that the student was becoming overly stressed and never called the dive before we got in the water. And as you know, no matter what diver you are, you have the right to abort a dive at any time, before, during. You're allowed to abort, and you don't have to give anyone the reason why you don't want to go dive. It's your prerogative. Absolutely. Right. Anyway, we jumped into the water. We went down. I was getting all my hand signals. Everything was good. We got to about 95 meters, and I noticed the wreck was a little bit away from us, that we were going to dive on. So I like most instructors, I have a sacrificial jump line. So I pulled the jump line out. I flicked it on our up line because we want to go up the up line rather than throwing an SMB. And I was jumping over to the wreck. And it's at this point where the stress of the diver became apparent, when I felt my legs suddenly, is that string around my legs? Hang on, is that string around my neck? Hang on, what the hell's going on? And I turn around and she's wrapped up in my line, because I was wearing big, thick gloves and I couldn't feel the spool unwinding in my fingers. And next thing, she's in the line, I'm in the line. My two safety divers were just literally sitting there going, and now? Fortunately, I had my nice cutting device and easy to get to it, and I just started splicing line everywhere, and then she started to run for the surface. Bear in mind, she's on hypoxic gas, and I'm like, there's no way she's going to do any gas switches on the way to the surface. So I grabbed hold of her, gave her a few knocks on the mask, got her to the line. I did the first two gas switches for her, but she was very, very compliant. And when we did the first gas switch, I looked at my pressure gauge and I had 20 bar left in my twin set, which is like 250 psi or whatever it is. It's not a lot, right? To this day, I've never asked her what her gas was. But we got up to the final switch and the lights came back on. We had a really good cry together. We discussed the dive, and then a few days later we went back and we did it again. Fearsome woman, absolutely fearsome woman. We're still friends to this day. I think I learned a lot. She learned a lot. In fact, I don't think I learned a lot. I absolutely learned a lot. I never took open circuit down that deep again because there were just so many limitations. And the problem with the open circuit was I needed all of that gas on my body for myself to come home safely. I needed to make those gas switches. Whereas if I'm the rebreather, all of this happened within 10 minutes. Yeah. All of that drama was 10 minutes of our lives. And I ended up, back at the first stop with 20 bar in my cylinder because everything went pear-shaped. Right. If I was on my rebreather, I would have had still 4 hours of time. So I was thinking in like nanosecond bites as to what I'm going to do to keep us all safe down here. Right. I was just like, hang on, the rebreather is offering me so many more opportunities because if she'd have started to run out of deco gas, I needed to bring her home on time. There's no deeper and longers and extended dive frames. I wanted her on the boat as quickly as I could. So at that stage, I would have been going on my rebreather. Well, I've got all of this bailout gas. I can just give it to her if she's having any problems. And that's when I started to have this real shift about rebreather is not just a great tool for me to extend my dives and do all of those things, but in actual fact, if you are very comfortable on your rebreather, you've got many, many more options for that other person that's in the water with you. So that was good. And then my last one, I had a diver come on a boat with me, and we were again doing a very deep dive, 100 meters, and I saw the diver disappear into the bottom is at 113 meters. I saw the diver disappear down there, and I didn't realize that the diver had decided that their life wasn't worth living.
No.
Yeah, so I went back up to my deco stop, and I was just doing the switch with, I had my safety divers, and I had 3 students in the water with me, and my 2 safety divers. And next thing, I'm looking down the line, I've got everyone switched and everything's good, and I just see this person barreling up the line. They've suddenly decided that they actually don't want to go. Hit me in the face, removed my breathing apparatus, yanked the regulator out. I was just absolutely frantic. So now I'm trying to nurse these guys and nurse him, and it was all a pretty epic situation. But to be fair, the 3 students I had in the water, that were so good. They took themselves through their plan while I managed this, and then the diver in question really suddenly came around to the gravity, really apologized to me underwater, and spent a lot of time on the surface. And I'm still great friends with the guy, and I'm really glad that he chose not to do that, because obviously that's devastating. Then we have to get off the boat and go searching 150 meters of water for a really good friend of ours. So lots of hairy moments, but most of them, funnily enough, in training. Wow. And I do a lot of work with ISO and the Rebreather Training Council and the RSTC, and I listen to my peers, and you it's moments like you sit and you listen to guys going, not in these groups, but divers and dive instructors are going, well, that ratio is a bit low. Can we not get that ratio up to 4 or 5 to 1? And then you sit there and you're sitting with all your learned peers and colleagues, and you're like, well, what do you think about raising the ratio? And they're like, you've only got 2 hands, right?
Right.
And maybe we should be reducing these ratios a little bit. So
exactly,
it's those moments that give us those insights, right? So, but generally speaking, mate, I've had an absolutely amazing diving life.
But I think that there's a few things here. First of all, is that the learning that takes place, the opportunity to take what these challenging and hair-raising things are, but then to learn from them and grow, makes you a better educator and makes every student better that's ever learned from you because of that. You're the first person on the show that's mentioned that, but I've heard it. I've been a part of people that have literally approached friends of mine and said, you're a technical instructor, you're a deep instructor, you're a this, you're a that. Here's the way I want to go. And they've literally planned it with people I know. And that kind of stuff. And you just sit there, and then there's the ones that it's not planned, like you. Like, they've got it in their mindset that this could be an easy way to get super narked and not feel anything really. And it just sounds very easy if one has made their mind to end their life, and this is the way they want to do it. But I think, a couple things. First of all, it's absolutely devastating to everybody else around. And then in the case of your instance, I think that there is a point where somebody all of a sudden has a little bit of awakening about the severity of the act and what it does. And then what ensues. But in both of these scenarios that you just talked about those 100-meter dives, and you're talking about, the getting to the surface part of that. There's a lot of people listening to this episode that are not technical divers.
Yeah.
Just briefly, take us through, what does that mean when you have to switch gases from those depths?
Okay,
because that, I think, is what's really rich and makes that even more powerful. It's not just the free ascent that you learn in your open water diver class.
Yeah. Effectively, to dive to those extreme depths, you have to use helium-based gas. Otherwise, the narcotic effect of the oxygen and the nitrogen will overwhelm you. So you're just trying to avoid narcosis.
Yeah.
The problem is that oxygen obviously becomes toxic when it goes over a high partial pressure, and 1.6 is the barrier that, as recreational divers, we work to. For planning a dive, it's 1.4. Okay, so you've got even less oxygen in the mix. So you're using what we call a hypoxic gas, so you cannot breathe that gas on the surface. And as you can imagine, as you're ascending to the surface, the partial pressure of the oxygen is decreasing. So therefore, your decompression obligation is becoming less effective. So your decompression will just keep growing and growing and growing. So if you're doing a dive on a 1070 or something, so 10 oxygen, 70 helium or something, if you just planned a dive on that, the decompression would be like days. It would just
because you have
insane.
so little oxygen in that
oxygen.
mix.
That's right.
And oxygen is what's going to help us flush that CO2, right?
Yeah, nitrogen. It does multiple jobs. You increase the oxygen, you therefore decrease the inert gases.
Yep.
So what you do is, if you're on open circuit, you plan to do a series of gas switches where you optimize the gas that you're jumping onto. So for a classic 60-meter dive, you may use let's do a 100-meter dive. You'd use a hypoxic gas for on the bottom. And then as you ascend in somewhere the 70-meter mark, 69 meters, somewhere, because 3-meter increments, you would jump to a hyperoxic trimix or a normoxic trimix, shall I say. So you jump to like a 2030, 2040, somewhere around there. And then as you ascend, depending on your rationale with helium, you would get to, in the 40-meter mark, somewhere around there, you may jump to a 32%, or in some cases you might go all the way to 21 meters and jump to a 50%. You may have helium in it or not. And then finally, when you get up into the shallows, depending on, again, your philosophy, 12, 9, or 6, I like to start my final phase with decompression and gas switch at 12 meters, where many people like to jump onto pure oxygen at 6 meters. I like to jump onto 72% at 12, or 80 at 9 meters. I'm not a big fan of breathing pure oxygen. I always feel a bit weird after it. Okay. So each one of those gas switches obviously comes with finding the gas, confirming it's the correct gas, confirming you're at the correct depth, the buddy giving you a double check, making sure the regulator works, orientating it correctly. Right, now you're on it. Switch your dive computer to the new gas. And then, of course, you've got a cylinder there that's partially used, that's got a regulator dangling off it. So you've got to get all that tidied up. And then you may want to get that cylinder out of play so that you can't go back to it. And then you do a rotation of cylinders and get that thing out of the way. And it's a very, very fun thing to do, but it's also a very dangerous thing to do. And when you're doing it for yourself and someone else, right, it's not the best of fun.
And someone wants to be bolting to the surface faster than those stops allow.
Yeah. So basically, on that dive, if I remember correctly, the plan, the first stop was at 69 meters. And then 66, 63, 60, 57, and then those are all like a minute, 2 minutes here and there. And then by the time you get up to the the 18, 15, 12, 9, and 6, they start to grow.
Yeah.
And they grow significantly on each other. So you do 10 minutes on the bottom at 100. I think that dive that day was planned for about 100 minutes. So there's about 80 or 90 minutes to come home. Because when I dive, I like to pad those stops out.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from listening to people like Professor Simon Mitchell and Neil Pollock and other guys like that, explaining principles to me and little bits of padding out to keep myself a bit safer. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for explaining that, because I think that's the piece that is really the challenge. You're dealing with a diver that doesn't want to be there, and you've got to control them, control you, control them, get everybody up safely, and be responsible for the other students that are in a training class. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So for all the instructors listening to this, we're all going, holy cow.
Yeah, it's a fair undertaking. And I have this conversation regularly, and I dare say many other technical instructors and what have you have this conversation.
Yeah.
You shouldn't fast track your recreational career. So badge collecting is it should be frowned upon, right? I'm not saying you do your open water diver, then immediately you do your nitrox and you do your advanced, and then what I'm talking about is real fast tracking. So within 2 weeks you're a rescue diver, and then you sign up on your dive master course, because what you need is you need time. You need to be able to not only understand yourself and what your own stresses are, but you also need to understand the environments, the varying environments, and going slow is actually a really, really good thing. I speak to many rebreather divers who are like, I want to do this, this, and this, and I'm just like, it's just too quick, mate. And they're like, I know you'll be capable of doing it all. The problem is when the feces hits the rotary, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Have you got enough time in water to understand how to get yourself out of there? Because when you start to go deep, it's like going in caves. Fast tracking through cave is just like, man, where are you going to go exactly? You've got one way in and one way out. So I'm really grateful because I think if I was given the option on certain things, I would have fast tracked. Rebreather, I understood from the get-go, and technical diving from the get-go. This is not something I want to do fast, So yeah.
But there are people that do, and everybody has this kind of aspiration, and they look over here and they go, ooh, I want to get there. I want to be that. But here's where the problem with society is. It's a cheap and quick society.
Yeah.
And everything's about getting it cheap and quick. That consumerism starts to eke in. And instead, we have to look at it. I loved how you said about this slow and steady. If that's what I would call an investment. It's an investment in time and money and resources and experiences. And you can never take away that from you. And it makes you better. So the 0 to Hero programs that, and abbreviated training, the courses that are done in a couple days and things like that. And as the courses get more substantial, the need for longer time and even time in between those courses grows. And I'm 100% in agreement with you. Absolutely.
Well, I'm married to a lady who is half Japanese and half German. Okay.
Oh wow.
So she's quite forthright, my wife. Okay. And she said to me the one day, and I posed this question at many seminars. I'm like, what is the worst thing that can happen to you while diving? And 90% of people will say you die. And so my wife said, what's the worst thing that can happen to you while diving? And I said, I'll die. And she said, no, it's not the worst thing that can happen to you. She said, because in 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years, we will slowly get over you not being around anymore. She said the worst thing that can happen is that you get paralyzed from the neck down or the waist down due to your long decompression schedules and you not doing all of your dive ups, because I do a lot of dive ups before I go anywhere. I familiarize myself with my equipment. I do what I've been taught to do and what I teach people to do. Because my wife, and we did have a laugh about it, she said, if I have to wipe your backside, you got 6 months and then you're in a home. Right? And it really does get you thinking. You're like, so I was talking to Vicky Batten from Paddy. We were having a good chat about it, and I was also talking to Joel Highness about it. And it's like, did your wife, your children, your parents, your family, your friends, did they sign up for you to die? Because the ripple effect of a death in any sport, in any part of life. I mean, I've just gone through one with my mom. The ripple effect is enormous, and the ripple effect of someone dying in our sport is, well, it's not a ripple effect. It's a massive tsunami effect, because it goes outside of our industry and then inside our industry. It is felt by everybody. It doesn't matter whether you were a TDI diver. The guys at RAID are devastated by the loss. And of course, we have other things like, if the spate of deaths that we've had over the years on rebreathers, that devastates our community, and you've got guys like Martin Parker who are constantly trying to keep it safe, and then you've got the manufacturers bringing out these wonderful units with these wonderful controllers and stuff. And every time we die, our industry, which is a niche of a niche of a niche, the rebreather, we take a massive kicking. And quite often we know the person, because our community is quite small in the grand scheme of things. There are only a few tens of thousands of rebreathers out there on the market, and we feel that every time someone dies. So for me, just slow and steady, man, and steady, and gather that information. And then you've got a life like many of us old farts have got, where we've been there, we've done it, we've seen it, and now we're waiting for the next generation of guys who are going to fill our shoes and go off and do the next bit of exploring. It's super, super exciting.
Yeah, I love that. Let's lighten the mood a little bit. You've got just one of the best senses of humor in our industry. Love hanging out with you. And I've heard some of your stories, which, I wind up getting tears rolling down my face when we're talking about it over a couple pints. Tell us some of the more humorous diving moments that you have encountered.
Let me ask you a question. Can you remember any of the stories that I spoke about?
No, and the reason I can't remember it is because of you. So,
I'm trying to think. I've got a couple of great ones. I had a group of divers come to the Red Sea with me to do some decompression training. And the buzzword at the time was the Deco umbrella, right? I don't know if you ever remember it. It was a buzzword for about 3 months until some really clever man came out and just went, "You're talking bollocks. We don't want to hear about the Deco umbrella anymore," right? So anyway, as you are, I've been on Google and I've got the Deco umbrella, and I gave like a mini extra presentation on this, and I take my guys down. I think we were doing a 50-meter dive, and brought them back up, and we're just floating on Deco, and I'm just kind of looking around. I can see them here. They're right against the reef, right next to me. Everything's good in the world. We're at a 6-meter stop, and I'm just like looking around, and there's a ray or something swam in, and I was having a little look at it and everything. And then I turned around, and my 3 students are now standing upright in the water with Mary Poppins umbrellas over their head, right? Absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But my favorite one, I used to do a lot of like mini expeditions when I was learning my craft so that I could actually apply to go on expeditions. Okay. I found the best way to do it was to just get with a bunch of like-minded guys, you're all kind of at the same level of training, and you're just going to learn, and you're going to read, and you're going to really try and understand in your own mind what your capabilities are, and sort of grow as a team. Because the worst thing you can do is go on an expedition and actually you're not that good, right? Because you become the weak link, and they can't have a weak link on an expedition.
Right.
You've all got to be able to do your bit. So we were exploring all of these wrecks, and we were going to the Maritime Museum, and we were interviewing old Navy men from these wrecks all around Malta. And we did many, many dives, and we'd get really, really bored. So we'd prank each other. And I was diving way, way more than these two guys. I'm a career diver. Lee and Stewie had their own jobs. And we'd prank each other, and like put a bit of dye in someone's glove, so when you took the glove off, your hand was purple, or put it in your boots, or and there are all sorts of weird things. You stick things in P valves and hide. When you come to get your condom catheters on, they'd replaced your normal size one with a giant size one or a teeny weeny one, and you're like kind of standing there wondering what's happened to your old man. You're like, has it shrunk or has it grown enormously large? So we had all sorts of pranks that we did to each other. Anyway, we'd all just got P valves, right? And
explain the P valve too.
Sorry.
Explain that to people that don't know.
Okay, so one of the challenges when you're doing long decompression dives is that you must urinate, because if you don't urinate, you can suffer from renal reflux, which gives you a bladder infection, right? And you certainly don't want that. So if you're in a dry suit, you can wear a nappy, or you can just pee, but they're both not
nappy's like a Depends or a diaper type.
Yeah, you wear
Depends.
A big diaper. Yeah, absolutely. Right. There's no ways I'm going to wear a diaper, right? It's just those days have gone, and perhaps one day they will come again. But right now, I'm not wearing diapers.
Right.
So what they do is they put a little hole in your dry suit, and they put a one-way valve in there attached to a tube, which you run up to like a condom catheter with a hole in the end of it, and you just join it all up, and then when you need a pee, you go to the toilet. It's fantastic. And they make a male version and a female version. So that and really, it's been one of the great inventions that have allowed us to really, really explore, especially much more temperate climates where you just don't want to be in a wetsuit, right? You must be in a dry suit. Right. So anyway, I don't know what they'd done to me that day, but I was trying to plot some kind of revenge. And I'm lying in the water, and we're in Malta. It was quite cold on the bottom. And when we got up to the decompression, it was like 28, 29 degrees C in the water. So they peel their hoods off. Okay. And all I see is this beautiful, long, blonde hair floating around in the water. And I was like, so I just swam over and I hovered over his head, and I just opened my P valve very, very gently, and I just let it go, right? And you can see him, I can see him to this day, he's sitting there and he's like, oh, it's getting really warm. Really, really warm. And then he can see the hue in the water. Right? You just see the little firmer halocline coming past him. It was absolutely brilliant. We laughed for hours and hours and hours. They never picked on me again, right? Never ever picked on me again. Had a little yellow mark in his blonde hair. So, yeah. Oh, it was absolutely brilliant. Look,
That's awesome.
And then once I get started on the funny story, like I could just go on for hour after hour after hour. You know, me and Phil Short, I'm crossing him over to Paddy, and he's crossing me over to INTD. Okay. So he made me do all the quizzes and exams. I made him do all the quizzes and exams, and it's like, okay, so we must be seen to jump through hoops. Never mind. He is my instructor, was my instructor trainer for all my tech stuff, right? We must be seen to jump through hoops. So, yes, so we go to this inland dive site. It's about 75 meters deep. So, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go for a nice deep dive, right? We'll see how good we are as divers, right? Anyway, we get to the bottom, we're bored. There's nothing down there. We're absolutely bored to tears. So Phil just takes out his slates and goes, shall we do our skill circuit while we're here? So we did mask replacements, gas sharing, stage remove and replace. We did everything at 75 meters.
75 meters.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, the entire skill circuit. And we were laughing our heads off. It was absolutely brilliant. And then we came up and did our decompression and got out. And I think we laughed about it for months. Every time we saw each other, we must go back and do another skill circuit. Because there was nothing down there. It was just like rocks. It was like, well, we're going to finish this dive and tomorrow we're going to do a skill circuit. Why don't we just do it all while we're here? And so we did.
That's awesome.
Yeah. you can count on Phil to do something like that because he's got this little mad streak in him. Really, really funny. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's shift gears for a little bit. If you could go back in time and pick anybody from history.
Yeah.
Real person, fictitious, it doesn't matter. Just to be your diver, to be your buddy on a deep dive, one of your 300-meter dives, your expeditions. Who would you pick from history to be your buddy? Anybody?
Jesus, that's a good question. Wowza. Sheck, Rob Palmer, Tom Mount. Tom Mount,
yeah.
Wow, this would be a long list when I start thinking. Jesus, there are some amazing guys. Billy Deans.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't met. The only one out of that I've met is Tom. But you sit listening to Tom give you a history lesson about discovering nitrox, right?
Right.
Voodoo gas, twin sets. Doing all the reports about cave deaths and why they're happening, and how we morphed to the long hose and the hog loop and the harness and the plate and all of these different things, and how different bits of equipment are named after different explorers. I mean, just astonishing stuff, absolutely astonishing stuff.
Yeah.
There's a big list. I think really it's who I'd like to dive with now. That's also really intriguing because I'd love to dive with some of the new breed of explorers. Yesterday I was on a webinar with David Strike down in Australia, and he had a lady called Natalie, and I hope she forgives me, I can't remember her surname, but she's doing a lot of really, really cold stuff where she's under ice and super deep. I think the one I want to dive with most is I would like to spend a couple of months diving with Jill Heineth.
Yeah,
that's one. I'd love to do some big ass dives with her.
Another extraordinary diver from the show.
Yeah, she is absolutely extraordinary. But the wonderful thing about where we are is we now have access to equipment, technologies, training, philosophies, understanding that our forefathers who are the inventors of our sport, so to speak, never had the option to do. I'll tell you another. Right. I sit and talk with Michael Menduna for hours.
Yeah,
Michael, when Michael was putting together Aquacore and all of that, man, I would give my left one to have been diving with him when he was doing all of that.
Yeah.
And Michael and I have promised that we will dive together at some stage. But the pandemic awesome. thwarted that a little bit. But that's a hugely difficult question, I think, for anybody, because there are just so many luminaries, aren't there?
Yeah. I love it. That's excellent. You've listed just, remarkable people. Michael is also on one of the episodes as well on the League of Extraordinary Divers. And, you're talking about Billy Deans and those folks. Oh my gosh. Yeah. They are on my long list of people to get on the episodes as well.
Yeah. Oh, Hal Watts as well.
Yeah, Hal. Yeah, exactly. Hal. He's great. Well, this has just been absolutely awesome. So much fun. I just love the history. I love the stories. Everybody else listening, I know, is feeling the same way. Toomer, how can people follow you and follow Raid, see what you're up to, all the different things you got going on?
Okay, so obviously Facebook is a good place to follow what we're doing. I will freely admit that I am absolutely rubbish at social media. I've been bitten a few times by social media because there are, and I think every one of us have experienced this, the cyberbullying that goes on extends. It's not just the kids that are getting it. It goes all the way right to the top, where people feel that it's their duty as a keyboard warrior to say stuff about you, even though they've never met you, which I find disgusting. In fact, at RAID, we have a training standard that if you disparage another person in this industry, we have the right to start a quality assurance case against you, because it's got to stop. We just can't continue to be rude. So I've been pretty rude I've been pretty quiet on Facebook, but I am about to kick all of that off again. I've also been quiet because the pandemic has stopped me from diving. And really, I think that, me talking about my motorbikes and dirt riding and all of that is all very good, but the divers want to hear about the diving. So I think the RAID International Facebook page and my personal page will pick up a lot. I've also been told by my wife and various others that I need to actually sign into the Twitter and Instagram account. So I will be signing into all of those and putting stuff together. Interestingly, some of the guys at RAID have asked me to start a blog as well. And I know Michael's been on at me that I should start a blog about, just get on there, and this is what I did in 92, this is what I did in 2002, this is what I'm doing tomorrow. So I think I might do that, because that's also quite therapeutic as well, when it's really, really quiet. And the lockdown has been punishing for a lot of us. I've not been on an expedition in the best part of 2 years, because the first ones were cancelled because I was working so hard because I became the president of RAID. And then the second ones, the pandemic has just taken us out of the game. Right. So not being in the water was horrible. And I think writing's quite therapeutic. So catch me there. Just send a friend request.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Well, I'm going to put all those links in the show notes, and we'll get people connected to you. Well, thanks again. This has been just awesome. I really, really have enjoyed our time together, and it's just great to see your smiling face again. And I can't wait till we can be together in Vegas for the upcoming DEMA show, and maybe that bartender will remember you again.
Well, what we should do, Tech, is we should schedule to have another one of these podcasts, from the bar.
From the bar. I love it. It could take a whole different angle, right? It would just be story after story.
Absolutely brilliant. We can have Michael there. We can have Whelan there. We can have all of the Mark Evans. We can have all the mainstay party animals in the industry at that table.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. Well, I'm sure that will happen naturally anyhow. Whether or not we bring the recording devices, I don't know. But that's an intriguing thought. I'm going to give that some thought. I love it. Well, hey, thanks again, bud. Really appreciate this. And we look forward to seeing all the great things that you're going to be doing with RAID in the near future.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I'm absolutely honored to be on the show, and I hope all your listeners enjoy all my ramblings. Thank you very much, mate.
So there you have it. Isn't Toomer awesome and hilarious? Such a great guy, too. I cannot wait to meet up with him at the hotel bar in Vegas at the DEMA show. If you're there, too, no doubt you'll hear us. We'll be the ones drinking and laughing hard as Toomer tells more great stories. Hey, thanks again, Toomer. That was an awesome interview. I want to thank again our sponsor, the Aggressor Adventures. Since 1984, Aggressor Adventures has been offering their over 300,000 guests adventures of a lifetime. Aggressor Adventures has something for everyone. For the underwater enthusiast, Aggressor liveaboards span the globe, offering guests 7 to 11 night scuba diving holidays with first-class service, delicious chef-prepared meals, comfortable staterooms, spacious dive decks, and unbelievable diving. Guests can enjoy every minute spent on these beautiful diving yachts. For the history buffs, Aggressor River Cruises Nile Queen can take you back in time to explore ancient Egypt. This 6-day, 5-night cruise offers guests breathtaking views of the Nile River and day trips to see ancient ruins, archaeological treasures, and more. For the land lovers, the Aggressor Safari Lodge in charming Sri Lanka offers guests intimate jeep safaris to some of the best national parks in the country to see elephants, leopards, monkeys, crocodiles, and hundreds more species. Guests will also enjoy their cozy, private, tented chalets at the lodge. To learn more about Aggressor Adventures, visit www.aggressor.com. You can find their link in our show notes page. Thanks for listening, everyone. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. That way you'll be notified of new episodes as soon as they go live. And please leave a rating. If you have someone to recommend for future episodes, please let me know by reaching me through scubagurucomp2583. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next episode. Safe diving and take good care, my friends.
Thank you for listening to the League of Extraordinary Divers podcast at www.scubaguru.com.